We're going to go ahead and begin our Q&A session. I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm just going to open it up because we've been getting feedback that everybody wants to ask questions about this international trade. So my first question is that we've been discussing doing business in Africa. In Jamaica, $1,000 can get you a lot. What's the minimal viable investment that American citizens who think they don't have enough money to have an impact in Africa can invest into an African company, African individual, and help them grow that business?
I think I just want to say this. In South Africa, the currency is rands. It does fluctuate, but it's right now maybe 10 to 1. So that means that if you could, it's a small investment. If you invest $500, that would be 10 times that, maybe 5,000 rands, 2 to 1. And to certain communities that's in the townships, even we would be amazed what someone could do with 5,000 rands, which is $500, because some folks are making less than, maybe $200 US per month in certain instances, which, it's not something that you can really live on in the United States.
Right, so on the technology side, I do from 25K all the way up to 500K. But with crowdfunding, you can just pull together. Right. So now you don't need 25K. If you have even $10, you can go on our AngelList syndicate and basically invest in the company. Right. So that makes it really reduces the barriers. Again, technology sort of reducing the investment barriers. So you don't need to have a lot of money to invest in Africa, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say the least amount you can invest is just time and interest, paying attention to what's going on, taking on a mentoring role to a company that's there that interests you. When it comes to a capital investment, I tend to agree with Eric, which is, well, it actually depends on what you're investing in. So if you're investing in a technology startup company, like the type we do, then maybe 5,000, 10,000, regardless of the country, is a pretty sizable investment for most of those companies. And then anything higher, you're starting to become taking a more professional investor role. But there's also this whole bottom market below that $5,000 for hair shop owners or barber shops or restaurants or local SIM card vendors. All of those guys need capital too, and they can't get capital there because there's no credit markets. And so banks don't lend to people like that. MFIs do, microfinance organizations, but there should be alternatives.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking about, in the U.S., we have factor companies that buy invoices and certain things like that. I would be definitely interested in talking to any investors about doing certain things like that in South Africa, because I think there's so many brilliant folks. I mean, we know how brilliant folks think of the Nigerian community in iTech and in the IT industry. Durban has more. It's the second largest Indian community besides India, and it's a large industry with the IT folks. So when you're speaking of investors, there is, I think even for something sizable, as the gentleman said, 5,000 to 25,000, because there's so many different festivals. So I think we could also influence South Africa how they market themselves, through investment to let the rest of the world really know how great and how smart they are.
So how would you protect yourself legally? What's based on your experiences, what's the legal structure like over in Africa compared to the United States, and how can you mediate those differences?
Well, there's 54 answers to that question, right? So, every country has its own legal structure. What we do when we invest is, for the most part, if we can domicile in the U.S., we'll have the company domicile here. That means incorporate here. We'll take care of all the administration, and they operate there. That said, if a company's small enough, then we'll just make the investment there, because it's not really worth it on either side to try to police it, right? It's early stage investing. You're taking a leap of faith anyway, and so you don't want to make it impossible to do because you're paying $5,000 in legal fees on a $10,000 investment. And so the honest answer is I don't really deal with that until the company's at growth stage. And at that point, for many reasons, I encourage them to create a U.S. domicile company. And mainly I do that because then I can get U.S. investors to put money in, because every investor asks that question, how am I going to get my money back if this goes bad? And if it's here, then at least there's legal protections. If it's Nigeria, if it's South Africa, if it's Uganda, it's just a different legal environment, and most of them won't go there. And that would prevent the capital from being invested.
So I'm domiciled in Mauritius. Mauritius is probably the safest destination if you want to do investments in Africa, tax treaties and all that sort of stuff. And mostly, because I do very early stage, the early stage is convertible notes. So it's very simple, convertible note with a discount. Then when we're doing our next round is when you start looking at valuation and pretty much use standard documentation because the legal cost and actually the cost of doing deals is you need to make sure that's not too high because you're doing very early stage deals. The most important thing at an early stage is there are 3 key things that you're looking for, right? Beyond an interesting idea, you want to be sure that this person or this team can execute. And the way you figure that out is just based on relationships. So I spend a lot of time with these guys. We got to hang out. We got to go drinking. I want to be sure that if I'm stuck in economic class with you going to South Africa for 6 hours, we can actually hang out. Right? That's very, very important, that you have a relationship with the entrepreneur. And then the third thing is really making sure that there's a market for this. Right? And you can have great idea, right? But if you don't have a market for it, you don't have a business. And this one thing that I emphasize to a lot of my startups is that you don't spend too much of your time trying to create a great product. Spend most of your time trying to take a simple product to the market and making sure that the market likes it. Because invariably, the market will shape the virtual outcome of the product. And every product goes through a bunch of cycles, right? And market moods change. And this is something that if you haven't created a business before, and I'm sure John will speak to this, a lot of entrepreneurs don't appreciate this, right? I mean, if you're a developer and a hacker, you enjoy hacking code and you enjoy sort of doing that sort of stuff, which is great. And so one of the things I encourage is to find co-founders or other partners who have this skill set. But also that's some of the things that I bring to the table because I've done it before. I know markets. For example, most of my companies, I will make the first phone call to get the first customer. I will call somebody and say, look, I'm involved in this company. We got this product, and then they will go, and sometimes I will go with them, or they go by themselves. But so those are the critical things that you want to spend most of your time and resources on, right? The legal part, interestingly, the legal regimes in Africa are much, much better now, right? If you have a dispute, you can go to court. Even, recent times, there are a lot of companies that have brought court cases against African governments, right? Just that it's very slow, it takes time, so, and sometimes you can say justice delayed is justice denied, but that's how the legal world works. But my view is that you shouldn't be don't be too stressed on that, right? Focus on doing the deal, because I really believe that you got to build all these elements, and then everything will then fall in place. Yeah.
One of the things that I would challenge some of the folks in the audience. My view was a little different. I knew that it would take me about 10 years to invest in Africa. I invested my own money, maybe $1 million that I didn't have, but I know people like to shop. So if you say that you can't afford a ticket, if you buy a pair of shoes, nice suits, maybe invest in travel and brand new relationships. So what came out of my investment in Africa, the Jazz Fest had an event in 2004, which I was able to flip the script a little bit, get South Africa to invest in over $500,000 US, to promote themselves post-apartheid for the 10th anniversary celebration. We beat out Chicago, New York, and New Orleans it's not as a big a city as, you know, Los Angeles, Chicago, or New York, but because there was an individual that invested in the people-to-people relationship. And you would be surprised, you know, you do have to go over and gain friends, you know, in a sense, so that you will really know who you're dealing with. Now there's some law firms that I know in the United States that have partnerships with law firms in South Africa. So with technology, the playing field in the legal side is getting a little more balanced in a sense. But I've seen a lot of major corporations take advantage of Africa in a sense. Even I didn't understand during the World Cup why more of the South African cultural music was not presented in a way to, like for instance, you still understand that, and this is in digital media technology, Lady Smith, Black Mambazo, Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, I was the last producer to bring her to the United States twice. But those are the acts that we still know. South Africa radio stations and digital media, they're listening to the same music per second that we hear in New York, LA, or DC. But we don't hear the same music that they're hearing. So I think it's an opportunity in digital media for us to highlight their music, and I think it's an opportunity for economic development through the digital media technology for us to enhance, you know, some of the music and the styles, and the fashion is just as good as the United States as well.
All right, so we're going to open it up. We have Norman in the back to pass out the mic. Norman Redmond. We have the gentleman in the front first, then, we're going to start with the gentleman in the front. Can we get a line then? Can we get you people to line up right here or on this side, and then we can...
I'll be quick, I promise.
Okay.
I actually, well, no, I won't be quick. I have two questions. My first, my name is Janelle Alexander, and my first question is about any entrepreneurs that might be in this room. It doesn't seem to me that, you know, they're going off to Lagos or Accra just trying to find an opportunity. That doesn't make much sense. Like, kind of, what are we doing to, sorry? No. Oh, what are we doing to kind of match an entrepreneur in this room with something that's very exciting that's going on kind of on the ground in Africa? Because I don't know, but like, I have a very good friend and former colleague who started a company, and she's in Lagos, but she met her Nigerian business partner in business school, and that's great. And so he kind of navigates the ecosystem, she thinks about the business, and that's a great collaboration. But how do we get somebody over there? It seems like there might be a lot of natural connections, and it would be a good thing to kind of connect those resources. And then the other thing I was thinking about is how institutional money feels about investing in Africa. I feel like it's kind of gone through a lot of, not ups and downs, but it's gone through a lot of different ways. Like, I remember in the early 2000s, Africa was like the flavor of the month. Everybody was coming out with an Africa fund. And then I don't know how like that's changed over time, because it seems like maybe institutional money didn't feel like there was a way for them to get an exit, which I don't think is true, but I think that's what they thought. And so kind of, what are your thoughts on how that's changed?
So the answer to the first question is actually, that's the easiest way to go about this, right? We live in a global marketplace because of the internet. I would go to, there's two websites, AngelList, which is just a community of startups here, mostly here in the States, but there's several African startups. There's actually F6S and a couple of others. African startups are listed there. You can find them, and you can just forge a partnership with them, right? And then if you want to go to the African equivalent, there's VC for Africa, the letter V, the number 4, Africa, C in there somewhere. VC for Africa, and essentially is the angel list of Africa. And so you can find companies that are doing something you have an interest in, and just reach out to them and say, hey, I want to help out somehow. Most of them aren't going to say no, right? And so you can just reach out. The answer to your second question is actually the emerging market funds that that were started towards the end of the 90s, early aughts, actually did pretty well. I mean, the perception is low because they made a lot of money and they don't want to tell anyone.
And then they kept quiet about it. That's what the point I was making, right? I mean, some of them made returns that were ridiculous. It was so ridiculous that they couldn't say it, probably.
I mean, he's absolutely right. I met a hedge fund manager, a Chinese hedge fund manager in Gabon for an event a couple of months ago, and I asked her what she did, and she didn't want to tell me at first, and I was like, well, if we're going to have a conversation, I need to have something to talk about. And so she eventually told me she managed this hedge fund, and I was like, oh, what do you guys, what's your reputation? She basically, long story short, she told me no one knows we're in Africa at all. They just know we're a hedge fund and we make a lot of money, and we don't want anyone to know. And so she wouldn't tell me the name of the company, and she wouldn't tell me anything about it. But the event she was at, I knew she was telling me the truth because it was only other hedge fund people. But for them, it was their competitive advantage being in that market. So I know that there's a similar boom going on now because some of those stories, I was watching CNBC the other day, and they actually had a 10-minute conversation about Africa, and you have the snarky woman on the left who's like, oh, well, Africa's been developing forever. And the other guys, well, like, that's the mindset, but that doesn't match the reality of what investors are seeing. And I mean, that dichotomy is actually a perfect example of Africa's relationship with the world, which is everyone's so quick to discount it, but the people who take the risk are finding more often than not that the reality is different.
Next question.
Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Hunter Davis with Sugarcane Magazine. This is gone, okay. With Sugarcane Magazine, we're the global African stage. So I want to speak on the cultural and for those of us who are interested in going to the continent for the first time, for cultural excursions, are there any companies that we should focus on for first-time travelers?
Well, I just want to tell you a quick, brief story. I was able to take Steve Harvey to South Africa for the first time, and this was before he was an expert on women. Really, and it may not have been an original idea. Let's just say that. And Steve Harvey had a major resurgence and a boom in his career after he went to South Africa in 2009. So I would say, to answer your question, there are so many bubbling things on the continent, period. I could just talk about maybe in South Africa, there's the Joy of Jazz that has moved from the Newtown Precinct to the Convention Center. There's the Cape Town Jazz Festival that has been sold 2 or 3 different times, but it's still going on. There's the Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week. If you look, fashion is a tremendous outlet. And there's also many different conventions on content. Africa right now is starved for content because of going from analog into digital media. So there's all types of ways that you can make money with programming. TV One, I think, has been in the market, and that is what I'm very interested from hopefully out of this conference to see, getting folks to travel for the first time or maybe join something that we can really set a fire to the United States and say, hey, Africa is our best choice, to really invest in and create a better and safer world.
And I'm going to let Jon go after this, but I just want to say that the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce, we're doing a trade commission to South Africa, October 16th through the 23rd of this year. So if you want to go with a group of people who have connections to South African business people as well as diplomats, that would be a great thing. Dr. Punway Gibson of Ecotech Visions, she's handling all of the lists and connecting you to the travel agent who's booking the flights. So, Jon, you can go ahead and.
I wanted to plug a company that you might be interested in, specifically for first-time visitors to Africa, or repeat. The company is called Tastemakers Africa, and they specialize in luxury travel to the continent. So their whole thing is about rebranding Africa and showing people the kind of affluent side. So they organize trips, They'll take about 10 or 20 people to Ghana. They just got back from Ghana. And then you'll just like live the fabulous life in Africa, and then you come back home, and then you'll want to go back because it's a lot harder to do that here than there. But the idea behind it is to really expose what is a kind of forgotten part of any place, which is that there's always multiple markets, and we tend to see, you know, the worst of Africa.
So for that particular company, real quick, I don't want to take everybody's time, but for that particular company, do they have a specific area that they go to every couple of months, or can I say, hey, I need to go to Senegal for the Biennale, can you hook up me and 10 friends?
So 2 sides to the company. One is organized trips that they plan every quarter, and that moves around the continent. The other side of the company is an app where you can book your own travel with your own friends and you never talk to them.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Eunice Kofi. I am the founder of Nweki. We develop health and beauty products specifically for people of color. My background is in chemistry. And this may help the 2 women that just asked this question. Right now I'm going through the process of starting to export overseas. So I've been working with Exim Bank, got cleared with them, and then I'm also working with the U.S. Commercial Services, which pairs you up with entities in Africa and other countries around the world. So I wanted to know, have any of you used any of those services to ensure your transactions or your investments, and what was your outcome?
No, I haven't had any of those experiences, but OPIC has been very supportive in getting a lot of U.S. companies that are looking to go overseas because they're DFI, right? And their focus is mostly to get U.S. companies that are going overseas. You know, they give you credit facilities and all this stuff. The other interesting sort of side to this is the AGWA initiative, which is fairly sort of similar to what trying to pair U.S. companies with African companies, but also, you know, get African companies who want to sort of export into the U.S. But I've not had any personal experience. But those were the 2 that
I think maybe joining the delegation this October, you know, I think with Dr. Pondaway and the leadership team here will give you a pretty good experience from what I'm hearing, because you have a lot of great minds in this room right now that has probably just as much experience as the U.S. Commercial Services because of the individualized relationships that have been built.
All right. Well, that concludes our time segment. Sorry, gentlemen, but we will have a chance for something after the break. So we're going to take a 5-10 minute break, and then we're going to open up our next segment. Thank you.